The committee is meeting today to receive testimony from Admiral Carl L. Schultz, Commandant of the Coast Guard, on building the Coast Guard America needs, achieving diversity, equity, and accountability within the service. Without objection, the chair is authorized to declare the committee in recess at any point. Without objection, the gentlewoman from New York, Ms. Carolyn B. Maloney, the chair of the Committee on Oversight and Reform, will be permitted to participate in today's hearing. The gentlewoman from New Jersey, Ms. Watson Coleman, shall assume the duties of the chair in the event I run into any technical difficulties. I now recognize myself for an opening statement. Admiral Schultz, good morning. I'm pleased you are appearing before the committee to discuss the Coast Guard's efforts to develop a culture of equity, inclusion, justice, and accountability. Today's hearing is part of the committee's long-running efforts to help the Coast Guard develop a diverse, inclusive environment free from harassment, bullying, assault, and retaliation. It is precisely because this committee supports the Coast Guard, its mission, and its people that we are committed to ensuring the service address the challenges it faces. I have long had concerns about the lack of diversity in the Coast Guard, especially among its officer ranks and among its leadership. The demographics of the Coast Guard fail to reflect the diversity of the American public. For example, only 5.6% of active duty members self-identify as Black or African American, compared to about 14% of the U.S. population. Fostering diversity is critical to building a culture that welcomes and celebrates varied perspectives and experiences and ensure the Coast Guard reflects the public it serves. Last weekend, we lost a trailblazer as Commander Merle Smith Jr., the first Black graduate of the Coast Guard Academy, passed away. We must honor his service by working to ensure more minority cadets enter and graduate from the Academy, which serves as a conduit to the service's leadership ranks. I'm also thinking today of my late friend and colleague, Elijah Cummings, who was fiercely dedicated to demanding accountability, protecting whistleblowers, and supporting the Coast Guard. I was pleased that language I authored to increase diversity and cultural competence at the Academy was included in last year's Coast Guard Authorization Act, which fittingly was named for Chairman Cummings. As we will discuss today, the Coast Guard has much further to go to ensure diversity and inclusion across the service. In 2019, the Committee on the Oversight and Reform Committee, this committee, and the Oversight and Reform Committee investigated the Coast Guard's handling of allegations of harassment and bullying made by Lieutenant Commander Kimberly Young McLear, a member of the Coast Guard's Academy's faculty who's Black and identifies as lesbian. The investigation made clear that the Lieutenant Commander's allegations were never investigated properly, and as the Department of Homeland Security's Office of the Inspector General substantiated, she was retaliated against for raising these allegations. The committees issued a joint majority staff report that highlighted significant problems with the Coast Guard policies and practices that contributed to the failure to fully and fairly investigate the allegations. The report also included 7 recommendations to improve investigative processes at the Academy and throughout the Coast Guard. I'm glad the Coast Guard agreed with the committee on the need for major changes and concurred with all the recommendations, and I look forward to hearing from the Commandant about the status of their implementation. Unfortunately, Lieutenant Commander Young McLear's experience is just one example of such issues within the Coast Guard. Since the Office of Inspector General first reported on her case in 2018, it was identified 3 additional instances of whistleblower retaliation within the service. In each case, a member of the Coast Guard reported misconduct only to be retaliated against in the form of poor performance marks, removal from leadership positions, or other negative consequences. I find these reports extremely troubling. Violations of the Military Whistleblower Protection Act contribute to a culture of fear that discourages reporting of misconduct. The Office of Inspector General was also issued a report in June 2020 uh, documenting major cultural problems at the Coast Guard Academy. The report found problems with how the Academy investigated allegations of race-based harassment in 11 cases between 2013 and 2018. In 6 cases, the Academy did not thoroughly investigate the allegations or discipline cadets. In some instances, cadets committed similar misconduct again. Just last week, the committee received a Coast Guard report documenting disturbing trends in the number of sexual assault and harassment allegations. According to the Coast Guard, reports of sexual assault have more than doubled in the last 10 years, with 245 reports of sexual assault in fiscal year 2020 alone. This report follows a 2018 survey that found almost half of female cadets at the academy said they were sexually harassed, and about 1 in 8 women said they had received unwanted sexual contact. Taken together, these reports should be setting off every alarm bell, warning light, and alert system at the Coast Guard headquarters and on every base, cutter, and air station. As the senior leader of the Coast Guard, Admiral Schultz is ultimately responsible for responding to this 5-alarm fire, and I look forward to hearing his plan for putting it out. Unsurprisingly, this committee continues to hear from whistleblowers regarding disturbing allegations of sexual assault, harassment, bullying, retaliation, and mishandling of internal investigation. I have pressed the Coast Guard about some of these cases. In one case, a service member was recently granted a retroactive promotion after her performance suffered due to her supervisor's abusive and inappropriate behavior. It should not take congressional intervention for the Coast Guard to do the right thing. While I understand there's a strong desire from the Coast Guard to be forward-looking, the service cannot reach its full potential if it does not learn from the past. I appreciate the Commandant has led efforts to address some of these issues, but unfortunately, it is clear those efforts are either falling short of what is needed or not making an impact quickly enough. The Coast Guard, with the help of this committee and stakeholders, must confront harassment, bullying, and retaliation head on. The Coast Guard must do more than pay lip service to diversity, inclusion, and equity in press releases and in congressional testimony. It must deliver results for the service members of the Coast Guard. Before I close, and without objection, I include the following statements in the record. A statement from Lieutenant Commander Kimberly Young McLeod, which outlines her experiences as a whistleblower and calls for service-wide cultural reforms. A statement from the American Federation of Government Employees, which describes concerns with several personnel issues and provide recommendation, and a statement from the New London chapter of the NAACP, which highlights complaints of racism that have been raised to their attention and request a meeting with Admiral Schultz. Admiral Schultz, I hope you'll commit to reading these statements and responding to the concerns they raise. The committee looks forward to hearing from you today on how you plan to achieve diversity, equity, and accountability in the Coast Guard. With that, I recognize the ranking member, the gentleman from New York, Mr. Katko, for an opening statement.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and thank you for having this most important discussion today. It's part of our solemn duty and oversight to deal with issues like these. Unfortunately, I don't think it's unique to the Coast Guard, and it's issues that we need to discuss and vet throughout the military, and this is a way to do it. So thank you, and I want to welcome everybody here on both sides of the aisle, and my good friend from New York, Miss Maloney, who's a pinch hitter today, it looks like. So welcome aboard. I also want to thank our nation's 26th Commandant, Admiral Carl Schultz, for appearing before this committee today to discuss progress he has made moving forward with diversity and inclusion efforts at the Coast Guard. It's far from a complete process, but we do have to recognize the things that he's doing to move this ball forward. As Admiral Schultz noted in his written testimony, quote, "To remain the world's best Coast Guard, we must be the world's most diverse and inclusive Coast Guard. Anything less means that we will fail to garner the talent, innovation, creativity, and performance necessary to meet the challenges of an increasingly complex maritime operating environment," end quote. I agree with the sentiment, and I look forward to discussing these and other issues at today's hearing so we can all achieve that goal. I want to thank the Commandant for his hard work in recruiting and retaining a diverse Coast Guard service. Since becoming the Commandant in June 2018, Admiral Schultz and his leadership team have focused on increasing the recruitment and retention of women and underrepresented minorities. He has taken a number of proactive steps that have helped make the Coast Guard a strong and contemporary branch of the armed forces. I applaud him for his efforts and am interested to hear more about the initiatives he has advanced. That said, I'm sure he and all outstanding service members in the Coast Guard would agree that any allegations of bias, harassment, or other misconduct should be taken seriously and thoroughly and competently investigated. The allegations mentioned by Chairman Thompson are serious in nature, for sure. And I appreciate the opportunity that this hearing will provide the Commandant to articulate why our men and women in uniform are a part of a service committed to rooting out bad apples and ending misconduct. I also believe that, on the whole, the Coast Guard has a positive story to tell in regard to its culture, and I look forward to hearing more about that today. The Coast Guard has an increasingly complex, difficult mission, and is facing a number of critical Homeland Security challenges beyond those related to the scope of this hearing today. Indeed, the service faces strategic headwinds related to a changing Arctic, addressing illegal, unreported, and unregulated fishing in the Pacific, countering Russian and Chinese aggression, as well as evolving threats of drug and human smuggling stemming from the ongoing border crisis. In reality, the Coast Guard is on the front lines of a rapidly evolving geopolitical landscape and is being forced to accomplish its complex multi-mission with increasingly strained resources. That is why I'm deeply troubled by the anemic funding levels proposed by this administration, which would slash Coast Guard funding apart from limited salary enhancements. While funding challenges for the service are not new, the Coast Guard is a branch of America's armed forces and is truly on the front lines of our nation's national security. And those front lines are expanding, particularly with respect to the Arctic. While they're also being tasked with law enforcement missions critical to the homeland. Unfortunately, the administration's budget fails to support our men and women in uniform in this and many other ways. Additionally, I hope to hear about the unique set of challenges facing the Coast Guard in protecting our northern border, where districts such as my own in central New York face their own set of threats with limited federal resources available to help mitigate them. Despite these budgetary constraints, I look forward to discussing how the Coast Guard is positioned to defend our homeland and national security interests with a diverse workforce. I want to thank the chairman, as always, and I yield back the balance of my time.
Thank you. I now recognize the chair of the Oversight and Reform Committee, the gentlewoman from New York, Ms. Carolyn Maloney, for an opening statement.
Thank you, Chairman Thompson, and thank you for inviting me to participate in today's important hearing and for your committee's unwavering commitment to ensuring that the U.S. Coast Guard operates in an effective, efficient, accountable manner. Nearly 3 years ago, then Ranking Member Thompson and then Ranking Member Elijah Cummings of the Oversight Committee, which I now chair, embarked on an 18-month joint investigation into allegations of harassment and bullying within the Coast Guard, including the mishandling of harassment complaints and retaliation. Our investigation revealed deeply troubling evidence of failure by Coast Guard leadership to conduct prompt and thorough investigations into allegations of harassment and bullying failure to hold officials accountable for deficient investigations, and failure to take corrective action to address retaliation against individuals who report harassment and bullying. After reviewing thousands of papers, of documents, and conducting interviews with Coast Guard personnel, our two committees issued a joint staff report with our investigative findings. The report made 7 recommendations, and I'm pleased that the Coast Guard agreed to accept all 7. However, recent events show that much work remains to be done. In June 2020, the Department of Homeland Security IG issued a report on race-based harassment allegations at the Coast Guard Academy and found that more than 2/3 of the allegations it reviewed over a 6-year period were not properly handled by the Academy. In December 2020, the DHSIG released another report that substantiated whistleblower retaliation against a Coast Guard member in clear violation of the Military Whistleblower Protection Act. And just last week, the Coast Guard issued its sexual assault report for fiscal year 2020 to Congress, reporting an increase in sexual assault allegations over the past year. These recent developments make clear the urgent and ongoing need for action to correct the disturbing pattern of harassment, retaliation, racism, and discrimination within the Coast Guard. I am so pleased that Admiral Schultz has agreed to testify on these matters. Our late Chairman Cummings worked tirelessly and passionately for years to improve the Coast Guard and never shied away from holding the Coast Guard to the high standards that we should expect from all branches of our military. I am honored to be able to continue the incredible work of Chairman Cummings along with Chairman Thompson. We must protect those who dedicate their lives to protecting us. It is our duty, Admiral Schultz, and it is our duty in Congress. Thank you, and I yield back.
Other members of the committee are reminded that under the committee rules, opening statements may be submitted for the record. Members are also reminded that the committee will operate according to the guidelines laid out by the chairman and ranking member in our February 3rd colloquy regarding remote procedures. Again, I welcome our witness, Admiral Schultz. Without objection, the Admiral's full statement will be inserted in the record. I now ask Admiral Schultz to summarize his statement for 5 minutes.
Good morning, Chairman Thompson, Chairwoman Maloney, Ranking Member Cacco, Ranking Member Comer, and members of the committee. I appreciate the opportunity to testify before you today, and I appreciate, Chairman, you entering my written statement for the record. Chairman, I also appreciate you recognizing the loss of Commander Merle Smith, who was a trailblazer, an extraordinary Coast Guardsman, heroic in combat, and truly stayed linked to the Coast Guard Academy and leaves a long legacy there. We extend our sympathies to his wife, Linda, and family. Let me begin by thanking you, the committee leadership, for your support of the United States Coast Guard in our endeavor to create a fully inclusive Coast Guard, where everyone can contribute the full power of their diverse backgrounds, experience, and thoughts. I agree with our Commander-in-Chief when he said that equal opportunity is the bedrock of American democracy, and diversity is one of our country's greatest strengths. The Coast Guard's greatest strengths is our people. I believe it's critical to foster a culture of inclusion where we focus on achieving fair and equitable outcomes for all who serve. The Coast Guard must be a learning organization. It is commander's business, as I term it, to ensure every Coast Guard member can contribute the full power of their backgrounds, experiences, and thoughts. We have not always gotten that right. Today, I want to assure the committee that I am listening, that your Coast Guard is listening, and we have and continue to take decisive action. When I became Commandant in June of 2018, I made readiness my top priority for the service. Coast Guard readiness has and always will begin with our people. We are dedicated to inclusive workplaces that mirror the great diversity of the American people we are honored to serve. We have made significant progress, which I hope to highlight for you, but this is ongoing work, and we must drive continuous improvement across the service. The release of our Diversity Inclusion Action Plan, the DIAP, last summer was a big step forward. The Diversity Inclusion Action Plan identifies tangible actions to improve diversity and inclusion, hold leadership accountable, and equip commanders with a standard set of resources. To facilitate these efforts, we have prioritized the training and deployment of diversity change agents who conduct diversity and inclusion training, coaching, in support to the total workforce. By summer's end, we will have 125 change agents trained and able to lead training across the service at hundreds of units each year. We continue to assess programs for their outcomes. We implemented improvements to our college student pre-commissioning initiative, or CSPI as it's better known, to increase the opportunities for individuals with diverse backgrounds to enter our officer ranks. We created a new officer recruiting branch, adding recruiters to key geographic locations to enhance the CSPI program, as well as our other officer accession programs. Only by improving awareness of the career opportunities the Coast Guard offers will we be able to identify and increase the diversity of our candidate pools. This is fundamental to our strategy of building a Coast Guard that is increasingly reflective of the American public we have the privilege to serve. As a result of what we learned from the RAND Women's Retention Study, we have implemented workforce initiatives, including updates to parental leave policies, which authorize up to 120 days of leave. We've created a reserve component support or backfill program to help units maintain readiness when active duty members step out on parental leave. We have updated uniform and grooming standards, adjusted assignment policies, and modernized body composition program. We are seeing exciting early indicators that the 5 to 12% retention gap across the course of a 20-year career identified by the RAND study is narrowing significantly. This summer, we anticipate receiving the results of another RAND study commissioned to identify barriers in the recruitment and retention of our underrepresented active duty Coast Guard workforce. Early findings indicate access to mentors is important. Hence, we recently launched a new mobile enhanced mentoring app to better connect mentors with mentees within and across the service. Our work eliminating incidents of harassment, bullying, and retaliation continues in earnest. We have implemented all 16 recommendations from the 2018 December DHS Inspector General Report of Investigation, the December 2019 Righting the Ship Majority Staff Congressional Report, and the June 2020 DHS General Inspector Audit. Our updated anti-harassment hate incident policies have greatly improved the manner in which we address allegations. We refined investigative procedures and processing timelines to expedite adjudication of complaints. We mandated additional training and enhanced selection criteria for investigators. And now, investigators are appointed from outside the immediate chain of command. These changes add fairness and transparency to the investigative process. In 2019, I issued a strategic vision for the Coast Guard Academy. I believe the first of its kind, and updated and subsequently added new positions to address spans of control as better link our academy to the broader service. We have added additional oversight and prioritized creating a fully inclusive learning and training environment, making sure that the academy and the Leadership Development Center co-located there are not only producing leaders for a diverse and inclusive Coast Guard, but they represent the diverse and inclusive workforce we are trying to build. So in closing, this work continues and commands my attention and that of our entire senior leadership team. As the Coast Guard continues our efforts, I look forward to working with our congressional overseers to pursue the necessary resources to effect change and to ensure we are focused on the proper and top priorities. Just as the 2018 OIG report and the 2019 Righting the Ship report were catalysts for our intensive review of systems and processes, your support will be vital to our ability to recruit, train, and retain a diverse workforce, the centerpiece of Coast Guard readiness. Thank you for the opportunity to testify. I welcome your questions.
I thank the witness for his testimony. I remind each member that he or she will have 5 minutes to question the witness. I now recognize myself for questions. Admiral Schultz, I discussed in my opening statement recent instances of substantiated retaliation, instances of race-based harassment, and reports of sexual assault and harassment. Each involved a victim who is or was a member of the Coast Guard with a life and career that had been permanently affected by their experience. I recognize that these issues have existed within the Coast Guard for a long time, and many of these cases occurred before you took the helm as Commandant. That said, you are ultimately in charge of the Coast Guard, and when you speak for the service. One common frustration we've heard from whistleblowers is that the Coast Guard fails to adequately acknowledge that they have been wronged. They may have their performance ratings restored, or the Coast Guard may improve policies as a result of their case, but they never received anything they can point to confirm that, yes, they were harmed by something that never should have been allowed to happen. It would be incredibly meaningful for those who have been victimized while serving in the Coast Guard to receive an apology from you on behalf of the service. So I ask you, will you here now apologize on behalf of the Coast Guard to anyone who has suffered retaliation, assault, harassment, or bullying, or otherwise been victimized while serving in the Coast Guard?
Chairman, thank you for the question. So anytime anyone has had a negative experience, been wronged in the Coast Guard, I obviously, as a service chief, am concerned. And we continually try to focus on corrective actions. When we have wronged somebody, clearly, I would offer my apology to that individual. What we try to do is each individual case is complex. We investigate them with the committee's assistance and keen oversight. We have considerably increased the fidelity and the really the professionalism of our investigatory actions. As a senior service member, the service chief in this case, we want to bring accountability to all matters. We want to make sure we have, investigative materials in front of us that allow us to reach the right decisions. But to your point, sir, any member that feels wrong, that was wrong, yes, obviously, sir, I take that incredibly seriously and am focused. And I hope the testimony and our conversation this morning will point to the efforts we are doing to try to right those past, mistakes and put us on a trajectory to be as forward-leaning and as inclusive as absolutely possible.
Well, thank you. I'm sure those victims who have been documented, who have been wrong, accept your apology, and that's what you do when you're at the top. Yesterday, the Secretary of Defense, Lloyd Austin, announced that he's recommending to the president a change in the military justice system to remove the prosecution of sexual assaults, domestic violence, and other special victims crimes from the military chain of command, and instead have independent authorities decide whether to prosecute. Do you agree with Secretary Austin's recommendation?
Mr. Chairman, clearly the Coast Guard as an armed force have been and will continue to be in that discussion space. I've been tracking with keen interest the Independent Review Commission and their findings. I saw Secretary Austin's remarks yesterday, and clearly as a collective set of armed forces, we have not gotten this right, and there's room for improvement. I do believe, and I believe other service chiefs have stated recent, like opinions, that commanders absolutely have to be part of the solution. Referring things to an outside body, there's potential benefit there. I think it's keeping the commander in the decision-making process, so is absolutely essential, because this is commander's business. We want to prevent sexual assaults, but when they occur, we want them to refer to the appropriate body, whether that's a court-martial proceeding or otherwise. What I do have a concern about is when we refer those outside, if that was the trajectory or the trajectory it goes, if they chose not to do that, does it come back in? Exactly how would a commander process that point? But I am absolutely tracking the SecDef. We will follow suit with the armed services, and I am open to change, sir, for the very reason that we have not gotten this completely right as reflected in the statistics you cited in your opening statement.
Thank you very much, and I look forward to working with you. I also look forward to working with you on the Coast Guard Academy Improvement Act, which I referred to as the Elijah E. Cummings Coast Guard Authorization Act of 2020. There are some things I think we can work on that. I now recognize the ranking member of the full committee, the gentleman from New York, Mr. Katko, for questions.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and thank you again, Admiral, for being here. I am very confident, and I encourage my colleagues on both sides of the aisle to probe specific issues of misconduct that have not been handled properly by the Coast Guard. But I do want to take a moment to kind of reinforce a few things that the Admiral said that he has been doing since he's been at the helm. And they're reflected in a document that I have before me. It's called the 26 Commandment Actions to Create an Inclusive Coast Guard. These actions include, in summary, creating a climate free of harassment, leadership on key issues, improving policies that disproportionately impact female members, partnering with RAND to find ways to continually improve the service, and strong stance on extremism and divisive issues. These are the things the Admiral has implemented since he came into service. There's been other things reflected that have been implemented since before. It's not perfect. We have a long way to go, but I do want to note that there are things being done. And Mr. Chairman, I ask that I can incorporate this document into the record.
Without objection, so ordered.
Thank you, sir. Since I'm confident that other people are going to deal with some of the other issues, I wanted to take this moment to talk about something I think is critically important, and that's the Arctic. Recently, Russia assumed the rotating presidency of the Arctic Council, and as we know, there's more waters being created with the ice melt going on. And it grants them additional influence in efforts to address strategic challenges in the Arctic. What role will the polar security cutters of the Coast Guard play in countering strategic challenges in the Arctic, Admiral?
Ranking Member Kako, thank you for the question. Sir, I believe the Coast Guard's role in the Arctic is irrefutable. We are a lead federal agency. We bring surface capabilities to the high latitude regions, both the Arctic and Antarctic, on a persistent recurring basis. What we don't have is much presence. I've coined the phrase that presence equals influence, and right now we're operating a 45-year-old icebreaker called the Polar Star, our sole heavy icebreaker in the U.S. inventory, and medium breaker, the Healy, that was built in 2000, not quite as capable, but allows us to do science and research work. So what we need to do is build out this fleet of polar security cutters. You referenced those. With the support of Congress, the second cutter was funded through the 2001 Consolidated Appropriations Act. That is a program of record of 3 ships. There's really a broader conversation to be had probably about more polar security cutters, or maybe some medium icebreakers, what we might term an Arctic security cutter in the future. So, but we absolutely need to be up in the Arctic and down in the Antarctic on a more persistent basis than we are today, because great power competition is alive and well there. China has operated off the Western Arctic, the Alaska Arctic, for probably 6 of the last 12 years. Russia is building out an increasingly large fleet of icebreakers and intends to use the Northern Sea route essentially as a toll route. There will be freedom of navigation issues in the future, and we will have the organic domestic capability to press into that and project our sovereign interests, sir.
Thank you, sir. And just to follow up on that, what efforts are you making with the Coast Guard to forward deploy assets and resources in coordination with our allies and partners in the Arctic to ensure our interests are protected?
Well, Ranking Member, each summer for many years now, we've done Arctic Shield from about June 1st into the fall. That is up in the Western Arctic, again, Northern Alaska. We will continue to do that. We forward deploy some MH-65 Jayhawk helicopters, Marine inspectors. We communicate and establish relationships with the local communities, indigenous populations. Obviously, we have to move and work at the pace of the locals and their interests. We are taking the Healy, the medium breaker, and we're doing a pretty historic transit. We're going to do some science work in the Western Pacific for about 30 days. Then we'll do a Northwest Passage transit. So up over the north coast of Canada, we'll partner with our Canadian allies there. We'll have researchers. We'll have some British polar sailors on board and other groups. And we'll pop out in the Atlantic, probably make a port call over in Greenland. We'll demonstrate that the Coast Guard is in fact an Atlantic-based Arctic Coast Guard as well. Bring the ship down through the Panama Canal back to Seattle. We've had medium endurance cutters in the recent months over in Greenland, exercising with the Dutch, with the French. They are very eager. We put a new Coast Guard attaché in Copenhagen to thicken the lines. When you think about the 8 Arctic nations, Ranking Member, 3 are Canada, the U.S., and Russia are Pacific-based. The other 5 are solely Atlantic-based. So we're trying to make sure we're touching the entire Arctic Forum, Arctic Council membership.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. How much time do I don't believe I have much time left, so I'll yield back.
Gentleman yields back. Chair recognizes the gentlelady from Texas for 5 minutes, Ms. Jackson Lee.
Good morning. Thank you so very much, Mr. Chairman. This is a vitally important hearing, and I'm delighted to be part of it this morning. Admiral, welcome again. Congratulations to you. Thank you for the work that the Coast Guard has done. But let me indicate that I am enormously disturbed by the report and the seemingly atmosphere in the Coast Guard. I want to thank Chairman Thompson for a very well documented issues dealing with harassment, bullying, sexual harassment in particular, and the numbers of those Coast Guard officers who are women who are experiencing sexual harassment. And when you begin with sexual harassment, you're on the edge of rape and other sexual assault. This morning, the Vanessa Guillen legislation was again reintroduced. I am an original co-sponsor of that legislation, have been, I think you're aware of that. There is the idea that there be a separate command, a separate process of investigation under the Department of Defense for these particular charges, to create an atmosphere where we have a fully competent military team, if you will, and that should go for the Coast Guard. So my first question is, would you fall under that regimen, or would you be willing to commit to an independent investigatory structure under the Coast Guard to take these cases? Women are intimidated. Vanessa Guillen was my neighboring district. Her death was unspeakable. That young women who wanted to be in the service all of their life. So let me just ask that question. I'll just put these other two before you, and you can briefly answer the other ones. I'd be interested in your funding and level of preparedness for drug interdiction and what work you're doing there, and your preparing and funding for hurricane season. You've done great jobs for us in the southern region and the Gulf region with rescues. I'd be interested in whether you're capable and have the staffing for that, which is we're expecting in the near future. So if you can answer those questions, I appreciate it. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thank
Good
you,
morning,
Admiral.
Congresswoman Jackson Lee. It's good to see you, ma'am, as well. And I know we've worked very closely in the past on the streets of Houston and other things. You know, ma'am, on the Fort Hood situation, the Sergeant Gillian investigation, we commissioned a task force in-house to look at that. And we actually have 49 action items that we derive from studying that investigation to bring those findings into the Coast Guard to make sure we're addressing their near-term and short-term. And right now, we have a group that is arraying those on how we're going to get after those. That's inside the Lifeline, learning from outside the Lifeline activities. I'm not 100% sure I'm clearing the question. If your question was outside investigative body related to the question about the SecDef and where they're going with sexual assault prevention response potentially in commanders.
Yes, would you set that up?
I indicated, ma'am, I am open to change there. And I think I reaffirmed already my opinion that I do believe commander needs to stay in that. So I think I would suggest that outside stuff be targeted specifically if it's going to go down that path, just to sexual assault type matters, because commanders' roles are so important in both prevention and response and handling of these from an accountability standpoint. To your other questions, ma'am, on our preparedness, we are in hurricane season. We've seen Claudette, the third, named storm, pass through the south, through your part of the country, really through New Orleans area and off over the Atlantic. We are tooled up and ready to go. It's been a uniquely challenging world, as we all know, for all Americans, for all global members of society. But your Coast Guard has been as busy as ever. I think we're as postured as ever to be responsive. Last year was the busiest Atlantic Basin hurricane season on record, with more than 30 named storms. And I think the predictions this year, again, predictions. And then lastly, drug interdiction, ma'am, we remain committed. We commit 4 ships, multiple helicopters down there. We exceed that. We commit about 175% of our stated commitment to the Department of Defense, and that continues to command my attention. On average, we remove about 440,000 pounds of illicit narcotics destined to American streets, ma'am, every year.
And you have the funding, and I also hope that you are very alert as it relates to your cyberspace, making sure you have the expertise and also the firewalls to protect your cyberspace.
Congresswoman, we are building out our cyber workforce. We recently just fully operational capability for the first cyber protection team. There is funding. Thank you to the committee and the administrations for a second cyber protection team, a cyber mission team. And that is an increasingly complicated, challenging landscape, and knowing how critically important the maritime transportation system is to the nation's economy. We have got to own that. I've told Secretary Mayorkas that, we own the maritime piece of all the cyber infrastructure, and we are working diligently, ma'am, to build out our capabilities. And that is a work in progress, and it commands my top attention as well.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you very much. Chair recognizes the gentleman from Louisiana for 5 minutes, Mr. Higgins.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. And Thank you, Admiral Schultz, for being here today, and to the chairman and ranking member for calling this hearing today. As an Army veteran myself, I understand the importance of diversity of background and skills in the military and how it benefits our nation's national defense mission. Diversity is indeed one of our nation's greatest strengths, yet we must never forget that we are one in the eyes of God, created in His image. There are more pressing issues this committee must address, like the humanitarian crisis at the border, the criminal crisis at the border, the constitutional crisis that the border situation is creating, cartel and drug smuggling crimes, human trafficking, foreign cybersecurity attacks, emergency preparedness, much more. While many may feel that they're a bit tired, need to take a break from these serious discussions to focus on issues more of a political nature, I think we must take a deep look at the priorities and efforts of this committee. The safety of our nation is at stake if immediate threats that we face take a backseat to non-life threatening topics. This committee is not focused on homeland security. It's focused on identity politics that serve as an evasion of responsibility. One concern many of my constituents in the state of Louisiana that has not been addressed by this committee or any other committee in the House of Representatives is the Sea Corps incident that occurred on April 13th of this year. During this event, the Coast Guard carried out search and rescue operations after a severe weather event caused a 129-foot commercial lift boat owned by the Sea Corps Marine to capsize 8 miles off the coast of Louisiana. This incident resulted in 6 confirmed deaths, with 7 crew members still unaccounted for, lost at sea. We must address legitimate questions regarding the Coast Guard's vessel response plans and concerns of recovery capabilities, as well as the frequency and timeliness of updates for the crew members' families in the event of an incident. I'm not interested in blame. I'm interested in what we can do as a nation to promote marine safety and emergency response by federal assets like the Coast Guard. I penned a letter signed by the entire Louisiana delegation, sent a letter to this committee requesting a hearing on the Coast Guard's disaster response plans, and we have not heard a word from leadership. Mr. Chairman, I ask unanimous consent to present into the record a copy of that letter.
Without objection, so ordered.
This, thank you, Mr. Chairman. The Sea Corps capsizing was a devastating event. Lives were lost. This is the type of issue that the Homeland Security Committee should address. Admiral Schultz, God bless you, sir. I know you're here today to discuss a specific topic, so I'll not put you on the spot regarding Sea Corps, and I'll only leave you with one request. Can you commit today to lead a briefing for me, for interested members of this committee, and for the Louisiana delegation regarding lessons learned from the Sea Corps power tragedy and how the Coast Guard and Congress could work together to ensure the likelihood of such a tragedy is reduced in the future? Can you make that commitment to me today, good sir?
Congressman Higgins, good morning, sir, and I echo your sentiments about the tragic confirmed loss of 6 and still 7 missing. Sea Corps Power was a very difficult, complex case. You have my commitment, sir, for a briefing. Absolutely, you know, we are working with the National Transportation Safety Board, NTSB, regarding investigatory occurrences for that situation. We need to understand what transpired. We are working in a unified command environment right now as they try to recover and right that vessel, and that'll factor into our understanding of exactly what transpired and how we learn from that. You know, first and foremost, as the nation's lead federal agency for maritime safety, security, environmental stewardship, we absolutely have to understand that. We have to preclude that from happening again. Sir, with respect to the families, we work very closely with NTSB in terms of, you know, kind of timing of their arrival and for not losing sight of the fact that there were families involved with missing loved ones, and they still have unaccounted for missing loved ones. Sir, you know, I know, and I'll take a hit on this, that in this social media thing, our public affairs folks put out some tweets that maybe seemed impersonal. We have looked at that and talked to our folks about that. When there's people involved, some of these social media platforms that limit tweets to so many characters don't capture the emotions involved with folks that are suffering loss and hoping, hopeful that they may find, in that case, probably not a surviving body, but just a body to have a, appropriate funeral. So, sir, I appreciate the emotion involved in this. You have my commitment to learn from this through the investigatory process. And we would be absolutely committed to coming and briefing your staff, or if that's at a hearing, whatever route that's seemed appropriate by the committee, sir. We want to inform into that and try to preclude such tragic occurrences from the future.
Thank you,
Gentlemen-
Admiral, for that
gentlemen-
commitment. And let me
Gentlemen's
clarify that
time
I've
has
received many briefings from the Coast Guard headquarters in New Orleans.
Gentleman's time
I
has
thank them
expired.
and I
Chair
thank you for your
recognizes the
service.
gentleman from New
Thank you,
Jersey,
Mr. Chairman.
Mr. Payne.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, for holding this timely hearing on a very, very important topic, and to the ranking member as well. Admiral Schultz, it's clear that much remains to be done to increase diversity in the Coast Guard's ranks. Recruitment is a large part of that. In fact, there is a Coast Guard recruitment office in my district in Newark, New Jersey. So I'm interested to know what the Coast Guard is doing to recruit youth from the inner city. How is the Coast Guard supporting these youth once in the service, so that you can actually retain them and encourage them to move up through the ranks and not just get them in the door?
Congressman Payne, good to see you, sir. Thank you for the question. And I think the latter part of your question just warrants a little bit of attention. You're absolutely right. We don't want to just recruit folks to the Coast Guard. We want to bring them in and retain them in the Coast Guard. For every Coast Guardsman we retain on beyond their 4-year initial commitment track up, maybe potentially up to 20 years and beyond, that is a huge win. It takes us multiple recruits to get that. We have the highest retention of any of the armed forces, and that still is a challenge. I'm working to find 4,000 Americans that want to enlist in the Coast Guard on an annual basis. We've been challenged to meet that goal year in, year out. With COVID this past year, we'll probably get to 3,300. I will probably spike the football in a sports analogy to say that would be very good in the difficulties posed by this last year's, set of circumstances confronting the nation. But when you look into the recruiting environment, about 28% of Americans are eligible to serve in the armed forces. About 10% of that 28% have a propensity to serve. And we're competing with the Department of Defense, DOD services that are recruiting 1,000 plus young men and women on a weekly basis. I'm looking for 4,000 on an annual basis. They were able to throw larger recruiting bonuses. I believe the Army offers a young man or woman $30,000 to commit to show up at their training facility in the first 30 days. Where I'm forced to use bonuses for recruiting, it's somewhere between $2,000 and $7,000, and that's usually in the leanest, bleakest part of the year. So on our recruiting offices, back in sequestration years, we took about a 50% reduction to our recruiting offices. So we are trying to go back to some targeted locations. We worked with Chairman Thompson for one in Mississippi and got that close to right. The chairman informed me that we didn't get exactly in the right place, but I'm aware of that, and we're cognizant to make sure we get that 100% right next time. We're enabling our recruiters with mobility. So I think it's a work in progress, sir, but you're absolutely correct.
Okay, thank you. Admiral Schultz, what can you tell the committee about the Coast Guard's Second Chance program? How many times in the last 5 years has the Coast Guard utilized the program? And can you provide this committee with the demographic breakdown of those who have been approved for participation and the circumstances of their participation?
Well, Congressman Payne, we do have a second chance program, and that is, the purpose is to retain good, solid first-term performers that have the potential, maybe had a youthful indiscretion, but can move forward on that. There are some, issues that are not youthful indiscretion, drug use, alcohol use involving motor vehicle, other things. There's some bright line things that do not allow us to do that. I do not have the data in front of me about how many times we've used the second chance program, nor the demographics within those cases. I will be sure to respond for the record to that here, if I could, after the fact, or to you personally, whatever your preference, sir.
That would be cool.
I'm also looking at the second chance program, sir. It's pretty rigorous with certain things with alcohol use and other things like that. And And I've asked my team in recent months here to explore that and say, do we have this right, given some of the challenges in the nation and the difficulties of the recruit environment? But sir, we do have it. We do use it. We will give you the data you asked for here at a follow-on opportunity.
Okay. And I see my time is slowly dwindling. So with that, Mr. Chairman, I'll yield back the balance of my time.
Thank you. Gentleman yields back. Chair recognizes gentleman from Mississippi for 5 minutes, Mr. Guest.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Admiral, I want to first tell you how much I appreciate the work of your airmen and seamen, the things that they are doing. Particularly want to talk a few moments about your drug interdiction and some of the successes that you had over the last few months. A Maritime Executive article referred to the cutter Mohawk returning to Key West after having seized 4,000 pounds of cocaine, having a street value of nearly $70 million. That same article talks about the Campbell returning home on February 8th to report to her port in Maine, where she had interdicted 11,600 pounds of cocaine worth $215 million. The Harriet Lane had returned also offloading 200 plus million in seized cocaine. A week early, the Gabrielle Giffords returned to port with $200 million of cocaine captured in the Eastern Pacific. Some articles that I found in the Coast Guard News on March 10th, an article said that the cutter Bert Wolf returned home offloading approximately 7,500 pounds of seized cocaine and marijuana, an estimated street value of $126 million. On March 23rd, it says the crew of the Coast Guard cutter Monroe offloaded approximately 8,200 seized pounds of cocaine and 11,450 pounds of marijuana, having a value of $330 million. And the last article from May 19th of this year says that the Coast Guard crew active offloaded approximately 11,500 pounds of seized cocaine in San Diego, having a street value of $220 million. And so just those seizures alone, those half dozen or so major seizures, if my math is correct, is over $1.3 billion in narcotics that have been seized and interdicted by the Coast Guard. And first, I want to thank you for that. And I also want you to very briefly, if you will, speak on the important role your agency plays in interdiction and stopping drugs prior to them being delivered to our country.
Sergeant Getz, thank you for the question, sir. And thank you for highlighting the important work of our extraordinary Coast Guard men and women. Yeah, we interdict about 440,000 pounds. It's about 207, 208 metric tons on an annual basis. Take about 600 plus smugglers off the water. We bring them into the criminal justice system. We feed the interdiction cycle. We develop leads. You know, if there's plea deals cut at the U.S. attorney's offices and in the U.S. criminal justice system, and that feeds the process, sir. We work with a wide host of international and domestic partners. We work closely with the DEA on developing the intelligence. We work closely with the national intelligence community. We are a named member of the national intelligence community. We do the predominance of our detection and monitoring to work through the Department of Defense Command, Joint Interagency Task Force South in Key West, that's commanded by a Coast Guard 2 flag officer under the Southcom Commander, Four-Star Admiral Craig Fowler, a DoD Combatant Command. Sir, you know, I believe we are some of the most capable, talented folks in the world on this mission. It's difficult. The ocean is vast. If you look at the Eastern Pacific, about 85% of the drugs used to come through the Eastern Pacific. We are seeing that split 85-15 from Pacific to Carib changing a bit. It's about a 65-35 split here. We've had more activity. You mentioned the Gabrielle Giffords. That's a Navy ship. We can take Coast Guard authorities with a small team of 8 to 12 Coast Guardsmen on a Navy combatant, and we can extend our law enforcement authorities. So we're putting what we can in terms of cutters. We're putting what we can in terms of air force use of force capabilities. That's ability to shoot out engines on fast boats. We're augmenting, you know, our teams at sea, because maintaining detainees at sea while you're continuing to do interdiction missions is challenging work. It was an extraordinarily difficult year last year, sir, with COVID, sending a ship downrange with somewhere from 100 to 175 sailors, depending on the ship class, operating, you know, with N95 masks and standing the watch doing this mission, sir. But I'm tremendously proud. We're appreciative of the support, and I believe it's absolutely critically important work because it feeds the instability in the Central American corridor that feeds some of the challenges we're experiencing at the land borders here in the United States as well.
Well, as a former prosecutor, I want to commend you and your sailors and airmen for the incredible job that you are doing. I think that it is vitally important to our national security, protecting the homeland and making sure that we are interdicting those drugs before they actually reach American soil. So thank you for your hard work and the men and women that serve under you. Mr. Chairman, at this time, I yield back.
Thank you, gentleman. Yields back. Chair recognizes gentleman from Missouri, Mr. Cleaver, for 5 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I appreciate all of the hard work that's going on as well, and I don't want to minimize that, Admiral. I think you know you have a very difficult job, and I don't want to make it any more difficult. However, you know, I used to see recruitment being done years and years ago, you know, all over, including in the urban core. There were recruitment offices. You know, there used to be a lot of ads that would on TV that would be directed toward trying to get you know, an inclusive Coast Guard. I'm wondering now, you know, are there any limitations that would prevent you from doing things like that, or do you believe that what you are doing is working and sufficient?
Well, Mr. Cleaver, good to see you, sir. I think the last time I saw you was at Mr. Cummings lying in state, sir. Your
Yeah.
question is a great question, sir. You know, there is a fiscal, you know, monetary aspect to how much recruiting and advertising we do. Advertising is quite expensive, and in a 13 billion Coast Guard budget, you know, comparing to a 740 billion DoD, we do not compete in terms of resources and ability to advertise. We advertise strategically where we can. Some of our best advertising is when we get our COSIs out into the schools to meet folks through our partnership and education programs. We are very excited with the support of Mr. Clyburn in the Hill writ large. We have a new junior ROTC program. We had 2 junior ROTC programs yesteryear, one out in Camden County, North Carolina, and one down in Miami, the Mass Academy. But we're going to Pinellas County in Florida. We're going to North Charleston. I think that program has a potential for very modest cost input to really get our brand out there. I mentioned about a 50% cut in recruiting officers back in the 2013 sequestration years. That was tough. What we're trying to do, and it's less about the physical office today than it is about the recruiter and the ability to go meet a young recruit in his or her home, maybe in their school, have the mobility. So we've had a tech revolution. We're close to giving the recruiters the ability to sit down on the couch with an iPad and seal the deal and do the paperwork. Now we have to bring them back to the office. The other office services are a little bit more agile due to investments earlier on that, but we're getting there, sir. So recruiting is a top priority for me. Our goals are to recruit 25% women, 35% underrepresented minorities. We've done actually better on the underrepresented minorities, that are exceeded the goals. We fell short about 20% women when we're striving for 25%. But sure, when you're only recruiting 4,000 a year, moving the needle in an organization of 42,000 does not happen fast. There's obviously annual you know, attrition and retention, sir. But we are working hard to compete. We do have 4 new officer recruiters targeting minority officer recruiting. We're sending them to Atlanta, Miami, New Orleans, and Norfolk, Virginia, sir. We're hopeful that may be the start of additional effort in that area as well, sir.
Well, thank you, Admiral. You know, you've answered the question exactly the way I would have wanted, and I do know that it's a difficult job. This is not necessarily connected, but I'm also interested in the town halls that you once did, or maybe you're continuing to do. I don't have any information that would suggest that you're still doing the town halls, and if you're not, could you resume or give us an update on what the status is?
Yeah, Congressman, I'm not 100% sure I know which town halls, but we have done some town halls with myself and the Master Chief Petty Officer early on in our tenure. We haven't done as much lately. We've had some town halls here responsive to, you know, the social unrest, the perceptions of the realities of social and just America with our Director of Civil Rights, Equal Opportunity Officer, Dr. Dickerson has done that, and with some others, we've had senior leaders participate, if that's what you're referring to, and some of that work is ongoing. We had them at a little more persistent pace here months back, but sir, we work very diligently to stay connected with our workforce, and there's a technological piece of how broadly we can connect to a workforce of 42,000 active, 9,000 civilians, and about 6,000 reservists, sir. But we do try to keep the lines of dialogue open. It's only when we understand what's on our people's minds that we can be responsive to that and strive to better ourselves.
Well, I appreciate the direction you're going, sir, and I appreciate you being here today. Mr. Chairman, I yield back the balance of my time.
Gentleman yields back. Chair recognizes gentleman from New Jersey for 5 minutes, Mr. Van Drew.
Thank you, Chairman Thompson. And Admiral Schultz, thank you for all the good work that you do and where you've taken the Coast Guard. I am very appreciative of your work, and I look forward to hearing from you about how the service is working to maintain a competitive edge within our military. I'd like to express my strong support. As you know, we've spoken many times for the Training Center Cape May recapitalization project, which was included in the President's FY22 budget. This $55 million barracks renovation projects the first of 4 phases, which would completely overhaul the outdated 60-year-old facility, which does not provide the services with the necessary infrastructure to fulfill its mission, especially its new mission. Training Center Cape May is the sole accession point for the Coast Guard's enlisted workforce, which consists of roughly 4,200 annual recruits. When the original facilities were built in the 1960s, only men were allowed to enlist in the service. The new barracks would provide equitable berthing and showers and restroom facilities for male and female recruits, which is a necessary change to help fulfill the Coast Guard's mission of increasing diversity and increasing equity. The project would also expand the capacity of the training center to accommodate 5,000 annual recruits, a much needed increase to support a more resilient Coast Guard. Admiral Schultz, in your written testimony, you stated that the Coast Guard had made significant strides to recruit, retain, and advance a diverse workforce, creating lasting and powerful change and enhance the culture and climate of the service. How does the Training Center Cape May recapitalization project help the Coast Guard fulfill those goals?
Well, Congressman Van Drew, good morning to you, sir. Clearly that is our flagship training command for enlisted members of our workforce, and there's tremendous history there. But as you said, there's aging infrastructure, and when you're in a competitive environment, back to my reference to 28% of Americans eligible to serve, and some 10% or so with a propensity to serve. When they explore the services, and these kids are bright, they're smart, they look online. It's not hard to take a look at Great Lakes Training Center compared to Coast Guard Training Center versus Air Force recruit training down in Texas, and you see old facilities. So I think the ability for us to update our training facilities, the ability to create more equitable physical facilities for our women recruits is absolutely essential part of this recruit and retain conversation we're having. So I am very excited, and we pushed hard through the department and the administration to get phase 1, $55 million in there for the first barracks. The unfunded priority list that I submitted through the Department of OMB to Capitol Hill has phase 2, which is the second barracks up there. So I am committed, sir. We're developing a capital investment plan for the training center, just like we have for our academy, to get after those things where our flagship training institutions are not sort of forgotten, because they're absolutely part of this conversation about the world's best Coast Guard need to be the most inclusive Coast Guard. And that's having places that attract America's best and brightest that want to be on our team and stay on our team.
Yeah, thank you, Admiral. And I can appreciate how the service is looking to draw in more recruits, and I support that. I'd like to see the current high standards of the service remain in place. And you and I spoke about that when we spoke privately. What assurances can you give us all that the Coast Guard will not compromise quality of recruits with the implementation of its diversity and inclusion plan, that will get the best of everything?
Congressman Van Drew, we are a standards-based organization, military service. We are not adjusting any of our standards. We're just working hard to go out and find those men and women from diverse backgrounds, cultural demographics that want to be in our team and obviously are our standards. But we are trying to be a innovative organization. We're trying to realize, things, a young Black woman that goes to recruit training that spends a lot of time in the pool there and has different hair than her white counterpart has concerns with that. We don't want that to be a disincentive. So what are those things where we make sure they have the right types of shampoos, the right types of things where we can recognize there are differences, there are cultural differences, there are gender differences. We're trying to be sensitive. That has nothing to do with standards. So we remain standards based. And what we're trying to do is be informed, though, different folks, we have found some of the Greek fraternities for some of our Black members and then brands. And we had very limiting policies about who could enter the service with a brand, a skin brand. We've changed some of those policies, but that was precluding very capable, motivated men and women who want to serve their nation from entering in our service. And we've revisited many of those things. And I think that has all been helpful as we try to be a Coast Guard more reflective of the nation we're privileged to serve.
Well, Admiral, I agree with you, and I thank you for the good work and your level of excellence continually, and really what you have set up for the future. I think the Coast Guard has even greater potential under your leadership. So thank you.
Gentleman's time has expired.
I yield back.
Thank you very much. Admiral, let me be clear. In all the discussions that you and I have had, I'm sure you've had with any members of this committee about diversity and equity, has there ever been a discussion about lowering the standards of admission to the Coast Guard?
Chairman, absolutely not. We have never had that discussion, sir. We, I think, share the commitment that we want to go and find those men and women of a propensity to serve and bring them into service and put them on a trajectory to be successful, male, female, Black, white, Hispanic, Asian, American, Pacific Islander. I want a Coast Guard where every member feels like their shipmates are behind them and pushing them to the next rung of the ladder. There's tremendous opportunity for success, sir, and we will remain standards-based. That has never been part of the conversation, Chairman.
Absolutely. Thank you very much. Chair recognizes the young lady from New York, Ms. Clark, for 5 minutes.
I thank you very much, Mr. Chairman, for holding this hearing today. And I thank you, Admiral, for your forthcoming with your answers to our questions today. I want to start by asking whether preventing harassment, bullying, assault, and retaliation is not just a matter of developing appropriate policies, but developing a culture that emphasizes accountability and justice. What have you done as Commandant to ensure perpetrators receive appropriate discipline? And have you, as a Commandant, prevented perpetrators and those who condone their behavior from being protected and advanced for promotions or career promotions or career enhancing assignments? And what do you believe is your role in doing so?
Well, Congresswoman Clark, good to see you, ma'am. Good morning. And yes, absolutely. As the service chief with the responsibility to man, train, and equip the United States Coast Guard's workforce, is absolutely my responsibility. The buck stops with me. What we've tried to do in terms of the anti-harassment, anti-hate incident policy things is policy is part of that. And we looked into that and we recognized where we were and where we needed to be changes. We've had some cases that have demonstrated that with some rigorous oversight from the DHSIG and from the committee. As mentioned earlier, we created 39 initiatives to tackle 16 recommendations, 7 recommendations committee. We've actioned all those. Accountability is woven through all that. The standards-based organization, as I referenced earlier, to some of the other questions in terms of lowering bars, the standard-based organization has to and is premised on accountability. We have the Uniform Code of Military Justice from a discipline standpoint. We have administrative tools at our discretion to use, and we absolutely, ma'am, will try to create a perception, a reality that there is accountability when folks do things wrong. Have we always gotten that right? As I said in my opening statement, no.
But let me ask, do you believe that there's a culture, especially for those who have risen through the ranks and have the power to hold others accountable, of avoiding saying anything negative about Coast Guard at the risk of facing professional consequence?
Do I believe there's a pervasive culture, ma'am? No. Do I believe some will hold that perception? Probably so. And as Is their perception their reality? It may be so. And my goal is to create a culture that doesn't tolerate that, a culture where folks are not being treated fairly, appropriately, and that is brought forward. It's a culture of intrusive leadership where leaders don't sort of wait for problems to go to them, but they're out and about amongst their people, spending time with their folks, having the conversations that would reveal those problems, and then we can act on that, man. It's
And
absolutely
how would
an intrusive environment that I'm driving towards.
wonderful. And so how would you say you have done as commandant to promote a culture of accountability in which reporting misconduct is not just tolerated, but is encouraged?
Well, ma'am, I would hope that the service and the service members would say I've done a reasonably good job of that. But would I tell you, have I got it right? I would tell you, I am trying to address many cases from previous, and I don't pass it on my predecessor. On 1 June 2018, I took the reins of this service, and with that, whatever came with that. And what we've tried to do is go back and understand those cases, propel them forward as learning opportunities, and address matters. And I think it would probably be incumbent on, my 57,000 shipmates to better answer that question than me, man.
Well, do you believe that there exists within the Coast Guard a sort of good old boys network in which white men look out for, promote, and protect each other? And if not, do you believe such a network ever existed? And when did it end? And what have you done as commandant to ensure that it does not exist?
Well, ma'am, when will it end? I don't know. I believe it exists in society. Do I exist as probably subsets of it in any of the armed forces? Yes, ma'am. It's the same conversation with extremism in the ranks. Am I aware of any extremists in our ranks? We had an extremist in our ranks a couple of years ago, and he's doing 13 and a half years in federal penitentiary because we identified him. We acted on that. We worked with the U.S. Attorney's Office. We disenrolled him from our ranks immediately on prosecution. So I am absolutely committed to accountability. If there are good old boy networks, and as you mentioned, ma'am, then I want to bust them up. And this is what our 125 cultural change agents that are getting outside training are going to do, tied to our diversity inclusion action plan that we rolled out. We started on this trajectory, Congresswoman, on 1 June 2018. My guiding principles talked about a more diverse Coast Guard, a more inclusive Coast Guard being imperative, a commander's priority from day one. That was on the street when I showed up in the office. And the diversity inclusion action plan was in the works in subsequent months. We were waiting for a RAND study that'll help us understand barriers to retention for underrepresented minorities. That'll come in July. I created the Personal Readiness Task Force year one that actioned the holistic RAND study for women, and we kept them in place. That was a one-year program that now is in its third year because I want to put that same level of diligence on the underrepresented study, because in the past, studies have been shelfware. I want studies to be causes and catalysts for action, man.
Well, thank you, Admiral, for your answers, and let me yield back to the chairman. I appreciate it. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Chair yields back. Young lady yields back. Chair recognizes Mr. Norman for 5 minutes.
Thank you, Chairman. Admiral Schultz, want to thank you for appearing today. I think this is the first time that a commandant has appeared before before the Committee of Homeland Security. I just want to thank you for your stance. I appreciate you coming to the office. You've been very direct. You've been very adamant that the standards have not been compromised, that you want the best people, and you want people who want to be in the Coast Guard. And I just appreciate your dedication to the job, and it shows during our conversation at least. I know the recruitment goal in 2019 was not what you wanted it to. I think you had a goal of 3,600 and you had recruits less than 600 that you missed. So hopefully we can help you do that. I think the Coast Guard is the best kept secret. We've got some serious threats, namely immigration. We've got close to 1.2 million to 1.6 million that will be in our country illegally. We've got drugs coming in this country, and I don't think there's anybody that's equipped to handle it like the Coast Guard. And as you look at the threats, we've got illegal fishing. We've got the Russians conducting sophisticated joint exercising exercises. They enjoy access to 40 icebreakers compared to the 1.5 icebreakers of our fleet. In the South China Sea, the Chinese Coast Guard is implementing a new maritime law designed to escalate tensions in the region. And, you know, the list goes on and on. Can you elaborate on the recent Iranian harassment in the Strait of Hormuz and how it affects the Coast Guard's mission?
Yeah, Congressman Norman, good to see you this morning, sir. Let me just start by acknowledging we have never been busier. I would say the demand for Coast Guard service domestically across the globe has never been higher. And to our conversation about standards-based and to Chairman Thompson's point, sir, I ask young men and women from all walks of life to do dangerous things. That's jump on a narcotics-laden drug submarine, jump out of a helicopter to pull somebody from a water, jump on a burning ship. Many of your membership here from the committee is from coastal states, and I think they understand just how treacherous the work we can do. And we don't go out on many good days. We go out on tough days to do tough things. So we have to remain standards based. We will remain standards based. In terms of the Iranian situation, sir, we have 250 plus men and women stationed in Bahrain. They are under the tactical command of the Navy's Fifth Fleet, which is a subordinate naval command to the U.S. Central Command Commander, General Frank McKenzie. We operate 6 patrol boats there. We just forward deployed our first 2 replacement of the 6, 2 fast response cutters to replace 2 of the 30-year-old island class patrol boats. Our men and women stand to watch, sir. There's been recent multiple news events of having interactions with the Iranians. They have upped that game. That has become increasingly an aggressive adversary, and our folks show great discretion. They are very much completely integrated with the naval team here. We have a team of what we call maritime engagement trainers that train allied and coalition partners on naval procedures in the region, law enforcement procedures. That's very effective. And then I have an advanced interdiction team, a team of 12 people that come out of what we call our maritime security response team. Those are our highest end assaulters. We have a team in Chesapeake, Virginia, a team in San Diego, and that team forward deployed is on a rotational basis with the Marines, Expeditionary Marines, the U.S. Navy SEALs, and the Coast Guard AIT. So they were just tied into, I think it was the USS Normandy, and one of the largest weapons cache seizures. It encapsulated the entire flight deck of that DDG with just shoulder launch weapons, Chinese built Kalashnikov type rifles. So we are engaged in the area. It is a increasingly difficult Iranian counterpart operating these fast interceptor attack craft, and our men and women are highly trained, professional, and truly integrated with their Navy colleagues in the region, sir.
Well, let me ask you this as it relates to the cartels and the huge problem this country faces with the illegal immigrants coming across the lines along with drugs. What can we do in Congress to help you patrol the area and to try to correct a situation that's totally out of control now?
Congressman, I'd answer that in 2 parts. I believe, and I've tried to link this in various congressional testimonies and other public speaking events, that I believe the counter narcotics work we do both in the Eastern Pacific and in the Caribbean basin is directly tied to the instability, the corruption that occurs in the Central American corridor, that occurs in Mexico. So I think continued support to the Coast Guard counter narcotics efforts is important to affect, why are people leaving to try a border region? Why are they leaving Central America, Honduras, Guatemala, El Salvador? It's because of corruption. They can't find a better life for their kids. They make that difficult, dangerous choice. I believe for the other part of that answer, sir, is I got 185 Coast Guardsmen today supporting our DHS colleagues at the border, 38 medical professionals, 150 general purpose coasties that are standing to watch so that Border Patrol agents can be on the front lines. So I think the best way to keep the Coast Guard responsive in that space is about 3 to 5% annual budget growth. We weren't part of the 2018 12% bump up that the armed forces got for readiness, but we're getting after that in the 2021 appropriations, sir. And it's just some positive trajectory on the operations and support side of the Coast Guard budget allows us to continue to build the Coast Guard the nation needs, sir.
Thank you for your being a voice of reason. Thank you for your straightforwardness, and really appreciate your dedication to a great arm of the military, and hopefully we can strengthen you in the future with funding and other sources. I yield back the balance of my time.
Gentleman's time has expired. Chair recognizes the gentleman from California, Mr. Swalwell, for 5 minutes.
Thank you, Chairman, and I want to thank Admiral Schultz, and I've been to the Alameda Coast Guard facility just outside my district, and I've seen the terrific work that the men and women who serve the Coast Guard do, and I want to thank you for that. And you're right, there's no easy day. You're not called for celebratory events. You're called because of a crisis, and I've seen that. Admiral Schultz, I wanted to talk about the Culture of Respect report that in 2015 found serious cultural issues within the service. However, the report and its findings were never released service-wide. It recommended that its underlying analysis be repeated every 3.5 to 4 years, which would mean the next report would be 2018 to 2019. But that report has not been issued. Is that report going to be coming? And if not, could you just give us a reason why?
Well, Congressman Swalwell, good morning, sir, and thank you for taking an interest in your California Coast Guardsmen. They do a great job. I'll be out there the end of next week here to finish the second part of the PAC area change of command. We just Linda Fagan left there, became our first female 4-star in the history of the Coast Guard last Friday, and we'll be back there to instate Vice Admiral McAllister. But sir, the Culture of Respect report was an internal report document created by my predecessor, the 25th Commandant of the Coast Guard, Admiral Zumkov, and that report was internal product that he made a decision on what they did or didn't do with that. I don't believe that was ever intended as an external report. I think folks have grabbed that and says we're burying that report. I don't see it that way. I would say we have dove into these same type of issues. That recommendation about continuing that report was a recommendation. Would it be wise for us to look at something similar? When I came in, we had a team look back at the findings of the culture report. I think we pulled findings and information from that forward into our decision making, into our crafting of the diversity inclusion action plan that we rolled out summer of 2020, sir. I think the findings, some of that's reflected in the women's holistic study conducted by RAND that we received the results in 19. I believe some of the findings will be reflected in the RAND URM study that'll forthcome in July. So, sir, I would say I'm not going to get into the pre-decisional decisions of my predecessor, but that was not a report. I believe that was intended for outside. Some will try to spin it that way or say we were burying that. I don't see it that way at all, sir.
Will you undergo a new report or a new study to generate a new report?
Congressman, we're always looking at studies. What I like to see is what the sufficiency and the quality of the RAND report is, because I think that is a multi-million-dollar investment for that report. We're going to take the personal readiness task force actioning arm, those 8 to 12 bodies I brought on board to action the holistic women's report and take the same approach we've already actioned. I mentioned the mentoring application that we're using. I've already talked about officer recruiters in 4 key locations. But I mean, if we don't find that to be sufficient and something like a cultural respect like report would be useful, sir, absolutely. I'm hesitant to make a commitment because we made a significant investment to get a report that's imminent here in the next 30 days or so that I hope will put us on the trajectory to continue to make positive change in our service, Congressman.
And Admiral, my congressional district in the East Bay is one of the most diverse in the country. This past weekend, we celebrated and sent off over a dozen individuals to the military academies, all of the academies except the Coast Guard. It was a diverse class that reflected the district. What can we do as members of Congress to help the Coast Guard recruit the best and brightest, particularly those that come from disadvantaged backgrounds or minority communities? And I understand the diversity report that you just presented, but how can Congress assist you in making sure the Coast Guard looks like the country it seeks to protect?
Yeah, Congressman, thank you for the question. And the fact that you had how many service academy members destined to their respective academies is good that you know that. What I'd like to, and you didn't have any Coast Guards, I like to make sure members of Congress that have a congressional process to screen and award congressional nominations put into that conversation. Hey, there's another academy. It does not have a congressional appointment, but it's Coast Guard Academy. And I think when you look at our academy, it's almost 40% women. We are really excelling on that front, better than any of the other service academies. There's a great news story there. I'm looking at the demographics of the inbound class that'll report here in the next week or so here. We have 285 students that have accepted appointments to the Coast Guard Academy, plus 8 international students. 114 are female, that's 40%. 104 are underrepresented minorities, that's 36%. That's the largest number of underrepresented minority students in the history of the Academy to ever accept it. So there's some good news stories. There's 43 Asian American Pacific Islanders in that subset, 28 African Americans. Now, the chairman's point, 28 of 285 is 10%. That is not reflective of society. It is better where we are of the 6%, and we have to continue to improve there. And this conversations about the academy not being inclusive are not helping. So I am absolutely trying to turn that story around and make sure everybody sees the academy as the most inclusive institution of all the service academies. 25 Hispanic Americans. As the demographics of America change, 25 of 285 is not a winning success story, sir. We need to be up near the 18% of society that's represented by Hispanics, marching towards 50% in the coming decade. So that is an area that is drawing my attention. So, Congressman, what you can do, I believe, is make sure folks are aware of the Coast Guard Academy. What we can do is make sure your fellow Californian Chairwoman Roybal Howard from our Appropriations Committee has said, sir, Commandant, you got to give me some materials. You got to give me some action stuff. You got great materials. Help me put those in my office so I can encourage these kids who may not be getting the Naval Academy appointment, tell them about you and show them something that gets excited, sir. So I own that. And we will work with you to figure out how we can help you be an ambassador for our academy that's a merit-based, non-nominative to stay. And the non-nominative piece is tricky. We have 1,100 students, so we bring in that 285. I try to figure out how you prorate that across 535 members between the House and the Senate. You probably need an actuarial to work that. But Chairman Thompson has continued to challenge us to think through that and talk through that, and we will continue that discussion with his legislation that's currently enacted in here and we're responding to.
Thank you, Admiral. I yield back.
Thank you very much. Admiral, one of the things, as you know, is we've been good at getting people into the academy, but we've had challenges retaining them. And so I would hope that you have a plan, which you've alluded to work on making sure that we give those people coming into the academy every effort to complete it. And you referenced that when Congressman Payne talked about it. And I would encourage you to continue to do that.
And Chairman, if I could, 1 second, we absolutely, sir, you are absolutely correct. When I came through the Coast Guard Academy in 1983, it was less than 50% graduation rate. We were about 87%. So we are keenly focused on those young men and women that we send to an American taxpayer-funded education to be successful there. And there's some things that obviously are trapdoor issues and they can't get through, but we want folks to get through to the extent they can adhere to our core values, and we want to make sure that is equitable. And the numbers of folks that are trite are reflective of they're comparable. They're not biased towards one group or another group. We're absolutely studying that, sir. We're using the Academy Scholarship Program, which is a preparatory year. 25% of that incoming class of 285, 20% came through our Coast Guard Academy Scholars to make sure folks have the right academic level of preparation to be successful. And the Academy's done some really good jobs, writing coaches, outside resources. If we made that investment, let's make sure we get them out the door. And then really, let's make sure they're successful out in the fleet. I went back this year in my leadership, rather than talking at the cadets, I moderated a panel with a diverse group of Coast Guard junior officers out in the fleet to make sure the young cadets that are getting ready to graduate and the cadets in the junior years see a Coast Guard that is welcoming to them, regardless of their background, their culture, their heritage. I want everyone to realize the Coast Guard's out there. We need you, and we're committed to you, male, female, whatever demographic, sir.
Thank you very much. Chair recognizes the young lady from Iowa for 5 minutes, Ms. Miller Meeks.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and thank you also, Admiral Schultz, for your service and your answers to this point. I'm a 24-year Army veteran, but also a commissioner for my Wapello County veterans, and our director is a Coastie, so you're well represented in our locality. You've heard about the crisis and the cartels at the border, but I'm going to turn our attention to a little bit different part of the globe. It's imperative that the United States counter the People's Republic of China's or the Chinese Communist Party's growing influence and ambitions as evidenced in its Polar Silk Road efforts. What is the Coast Guard doing to augment the development and deployment of maritime domain awareness technologies, as well as surface presence capabilities in the Arctic?
Thank you for the question, and I'm glad we have a Coast Guardsman that's tied into the Veterans Organization up there. That is fantastic, and thanks for acknowledging that individual. Then we are absolutely part of the conversation on how do you temper war in a great power competition, national security strategy. We find ourselves, national defense strategy. We bring a lot to that. The Coast Guard was written in. We did a tri-service maritime strategy, Advantage at Sea, with the CNO, Admiral Gilday, the Commandant of Marine Corps, Dave Berger, myself. We put that out last fall. that talks about the increasingly important role where the Coast Guard fits into the deployment of integrated all-domain naval power across the globe. We've been a Pacific-based Coast Guard for more than 150 years. I believe when you talk about the One Belt, One Road, the Polar Road, Silk Road, all those different Chinese initiatives, what we bring is a people-to-people relationship difference. You know, out in Oceania, the Pacific Island nations, Federated States of Micronesia, the CNMI, that region of the world, you know, these nations derive 50% plus of their gross domestic product from the ocean. They have very little enforcement capabilities. They are subject to illegal fishing, IUUF fishing by powerful distant water nation states, the most worst aggressors being the Chinese there. What we can do is come in and we can capacity build. We can help them understand the threats to their ecosystems. We can help them develop their law enforcement capabilities. We can partner. The Australians have a patrol boat program. We can work with the Australians on training, on maintenance. We have deployed national security cutters. National security cutter Kimball came back from operations out near Fiji recently. We have 3 fast response cutters. These are new patrol boats that I will be commissioning in Guam here in the coming weeks. They have 10,000-mile expeditionary range, so we can get out and do things with those boats that we couldn't do with their predecessors, the Island class patrol boats. We're renaming our sector in Guam as really forces forward deployed in Guam, because they are increasingly part of this conversation about how do you temper an increasingly aggressive, antagonistic, coercive China. And I believe what we bring, ma'am, as the United States Coast Guard, a recognized world-class Coast Guard, is we bring a credible voice. And when we say Coast Guards, you know, what I see the Chinese government using their Coast Guard as the actioning arm in the South China Sea and the East China Sea. Their PLA Navy sort of stays at a distance. It's the Chinese Coast Guard, the People's Maritime Militia, that's used to run down Vietnamese, Indonesian fishermen in disputed spaces. We can come in and say, hey, the world's best Coast Guards don't operate that way. We follow modern maritime governance. We follow the international rules-based order. I believe that's what we bring, man. We don't bring a ton of capacity, but strategically utilized, you know, some deployments, the authorities building a like-minded coalition of partner nations, NGOs, academia on this IUF fishing threat. I think the Coast Guard is an absolute critical enabler to that whole of government fight in this great power model we find ourselves, man.
Thank you. And Mr. Chair, I yield the balance of my time to Representative Guest.
Gentlemen, gentlelady yields time to Mr. Guest.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Admiral, I want to talk very briefly about the Arctic. The U.S. has been an Arctic nation since we purchased Alaska in 1867. But the federal government has not invested in new icebreakers since the Healy was commissioned in 1999. The Coast Guard icebreaker fleet has a total of 2 ships, the Polar Star and the Healy. Meanwhile, Russia has the largest icebreaking fleet in the world, numbering over 40 ships, with 3 more under construction and a dozen planned in the next decade. Could you please speak on the importance of investing in new icebreakers and what we are seeing to implement the plan that was put in place by the previous administration that outlined the construction of 6 new icebreakers?
Congressman Guest, thank you for the question. You're absolutely correct. We are woefully under invested in high latitude capability and capacity in terms of icebreakers. And the good news story is I believe this is a bipartisan, bicameral issue on Capitol Hill. It commanded the attention of the former administration. It commands the attention of the 46th president's administration. We're having very constructive conversations. I would say there was a clear handoff of the baton about the importance of having increasing U.S. presence in the high latitude regions. Now we got to build these ships, and we haven't built an icebreaker here, a heavy icebreaker, in more than 45 years. There's unique steel work. We've awarded the contract to BT Halter in the spring of 2019. Steel should start being cut in the coming months. That is a program of record, 3 ships. Earlier, I alluded to 2 being funded. There's really a conversation that needs to happen, and I've had these conversations with the former National Security Council and continue to have these conversations with the current National Security Council about really, it's probably 4 to 6 heavy icebreakers is what we really need, and we need some medium breakers. And the good news is we've conditioned the space. My predecessors, the 25th, 24th, 23rd Commandant, talked for over a decade about the importance of more icebreaking capacity. Now we've, I think, convinced those folks that are decision makers in the political realm of the importance. Now we got about building the ship. So if we can maintain momentum, continue discussions about what a really capable United States Arctic nation looks like in terms of capacity, I think we'll get to a better place. The Navy The Air Force, the other services are obviously keened in on the Arctic. The Arctic, presents a very high-risk, vulnerable approach. The NORTHCOM commander, General Van Herk, talks about the Arctic all the time in terms of the risk. We see Russian long-range bombers operating off Alaska in increasingly high numbers and increasing volume. So there's a lot of geostrategic importance of the Arctic, sir, and I think we're getting after it. If we can ramp up the pace, that's absolutely, I would welcome that discussion. But right now, we're on a much better trajectory than we've been.
Gentleman's time
Thank
has
you, Mr.
expired.
Chairman. I yield back.
Chair recognizes the young lady from New Jersey for 5 minutes, Ms. Watson Coleman.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and thank you to the ranking member for bringing us together for this really important meeting. Admiral, it is good to see you again. I really appreciated the conversation that we had in my office. I want you to know that I have great respect for your mission, for your leadership, and you know where I stand as it relates to making sure that you have the fleet that you need. I am 100% in support of it. But I'd like to refocus our attention on the purpose of today's hearing, which has to do with achieving diversity, equity, and accountability within the service. I know that you're aware that in December 18th, the Office of Inspector General report substantiated the allegations of retaliation against Kimberly Young McClear, Lieutenant Commander, in violation of the Military Whistleblowers Protection Act. And additionally, the majority staff report issued by this committee and the Committee on Oversight and Reform made clear that the Lieutenant Commander's allegation of harassment and bullying were never fully investigated. I also understand that the captain who allegedly harassed and bullied her has since retired from the Coast Guard. However, there are others still within the Coast Guard who allowed her allegations to go uninvestigated and who failed to protect her from retaliation. It is imperative that the Coast Guard holds these leaders accountable for retaliation and ensure survivors are made whole. It's important for us to have these plans and these intentions and this training, but the consequences of behavior is vitally important as we try to improve our system and the culture within our system. So I want to ask you, what specifically has the Coast Guard done to hold individuals accountable for the failures that occurred in this case? And what has been done to hold individuals accountable in other cases of substantiated retaliation?
Well, Congresswoman Watson Coleman, ma'am, it's good to see you, and I enjoyed the opportunity to come chat with you in your office, and thanks for your frankness. Ma'am, this case that you referenced to in the 2018 DHS-IG whistleblower case, obviously a landmark case, and I have, that came to my attention about 5 months into my assignment here, and I made a statement. It came to my attention that the whistleblower report had dropped when I was at a press event, the National Press Club, and I said, we absolutely have to protect whistleblowers, and I own the situation, and we're going to get after action at. Ma'am, I've studied that case at length. There was 3 investigations. The first investigation was convened by the Superintendent Academy to look into this, then Lieutenant Commander McClear Young, now Commander McClear Young's assertions or allegations. It was investigated. It recommended additional investigation. The then Assistant Superintendent called for, and this was in a timely fashion, a very responsive fashion, called for a subsequent investigation, a climate investigation. That was not the optimal or the artful tool for that subsequent investigation. It had, meaningful findings that painted a picture of the relationship between the faculty member, Ms. McClear Young, and her boss. There were some issues there, but it was not the right tool. Our subsequent changes to our anti-harassment, anti-hazing incident policy will clarify that you do not use a climate survey, climate investigation in forthcoming cases. That was not an appropriate tool. There was, the Assistant Soup subsequently departed the academy in the subsequent months. His successor came in, other allegations came in, another investigation was triggered. This time it came to the headquarters level. You talked about the substantiated findings. We had a Coast Guard GS-15, former Lieutenant Colonel of the Army, who did the investigation, and she found, and her findings were there, blatant acts, discrimination, bullying. When reviewed in the whole.
Sorry, Admiral, I have a couple of questions. I know that there have been substantial improvement to the investigation process. Who investigates and what and how it's investigated. I'm concerned with when you find substantiated allegations, what are the consequences to the individuals that either perpetrated the harassment or the discrimination or allowed it and didn't do anything about it? What are the actions that were taken?
Yes, ma'am. And I think in this case is kind of critically important to that. So just to finish, so Miss Davis's investigation painted the picture. You're familiar with what she said. It'd be considered the environment to be intimidating. Correct. She also went on to say she did not recommend disciplinary action. I reviewed each and every one of those investigations, ma'am. And in that timeline that transpired, it started back in 14, 15 through 18. The officer, the captain at the academy, the department head had since been reassigned inside the academy, subsequently reassigned to the R&D center, put a retirement letter in. And there was not sufficient grounds for me to take disciplinary action or administrative action. So what I've focused on is corrective action.
So, sir, we do acknowledge the fact that she was a victim of harassment and bullying.
Yes.
Is that so? Right? Have you, and the chairman asked you this question, but you artfully dodged the yes or no. Has there been a public apology specifically to her on this issue? And in addition, sir, would you be willing to issue a written apology for the record on this? And that's a simply yes or no.
Well, Congresswoman, I'm not sure it's as simply as a yes or no question, ma'am. I would say I sent the 4-star vice commandant to the Coast Guard Academy early in 2019, and he did issue a verbal apology to the commander in front of her faculty members and peers. I was up there subsequent weeks at a leadership address. I talked about my most recent, and I addressed the Cadet Corps. The first question I got was from Commander McClure Young, then Lieutenant Commander Young, and I stated that the Coast Guard had not done right by her, and that was unfortunate, and we are actioning that and moving forward, ma'am. Will I issue a written apology? That's a tricky business in a service. The chairman asked me if I would apologize up front to men and women that were wronged. Absolutely so. And we're in a scheme of good order and discipline, military uniform justice.
Thank you.
57,000 workforce, ma'am. This is a tricky space, but I have apologized.
Yes, it is a tricky space, sir. I'm sorry, it is a tricky space, but we cannot have people who are trying to serve our country in this capacity or any to be harassed or discriminated against because they're a woman or a minority or a gay or whatever. And so where we find that, not only do we sort of articulate our that it is unacceptable to have this culture, there gotta be consequences, because if there are no consequences, there's no change behavior. And simple reassignment is not really a consequence.
Gentlelady's time has expired. Chair recognizes the gentleman from Texas, Mr. Fluger, for 5 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Admiral, thank you for your service to this country, for keeping our borders safe, our country safe, for what you've done throughout your career, for what the entire Coast Guard does, for leading us through some difficult times. As a military veteran, a service academy graduate myself from the Air Force Academy, I also know what it means to attend one of those institutions and to train our folks to be resilient, ready, and lethal when needed. We've heard quite a bit about the threats we're facing our country, China, Russia, Iran, the dangerous drug cartels. And it appears from my perspective, Admiral, that we really, and with 20 plus years of service, that we are really facing unprecedented threat levels everywhere around the world. And I'm very interested to hear from your perspective, what is the greatest threat facing our homeland? And I have some follow-on questions to this. So what is the greatest threat facing the homeland right now?
Well, Congressman, thanks for the question. Thanks for your service. Sir, it's that's a difficult question. The National Defense Strategy, there's an interim strategy, and Secretary Austin is working with the senior military team. I sit not as a bylaw member of the Joint Staff, but at the courtesy of the chairman and the SecDef at the table. And I think we're trying to get our arms around with the new national security apparatus, the president's team, about what that strategy looks like. I think the pacing threat will likely remain China. I think Russia, and what we've seen in recent cyber activities is clearly troubling. The president, having recently met with President Putin, I think speaks to the urgency there. I think about it through the Coast Guard lens. $5.6 trillion, 30 million jobs are tied to the domestic marine transportation system, where 90%, 95+% of our goods enter our nation through our ports and waterways, 360 ports, 25,000 miles of waterway. So from a Coast Guard standpoint, it's all of the above. You know, we need to project Coast Guard capacity and capabilities to support the combatant commanders in the Arabian Gulf that we talked earlier about, in the East China, South China Sea. We just had a national security cutter come back from a Sixth Fleet deployment. They were up in the Black Sea as Russia was mounting troops here, as we all followed in the news. We were able to send a cutter in there. We worked in the great success story. We worked with the Georgians, Ukrainians. We transferred excess defense article, former Coast Guard boats to them. They came out and worked with us. It was a show of NATO allied force and partnership collaboration. So I'd be pressed to say, I think it's an amalgamation of those threats. It's the great power competition, the Middle East, where we're trying to draw down forces, and the president's declared we're drawing down forces. That is in his wheelhouse, and we understand that the Pentagon is acting on that. I think we have to pay attention to all these things. So it's a multi-dimensional threat landscape, and my goal is to prepare Coast Guard forces to be put into the fight against all those threats.
Admiral, thank you for keeping your eye on the ball and wading through an environment that we can get sidetracked with issues that take our eye off the ball. Over the past couple months, we've seen increased Russian aggression, including cyber attacks that you just mentioned on our critical infrastructure. Tens of thousands of Russian troops that are posted up on the Ukrainian border, which is the largest buildup we've seen even before the illegal annexation of the Crimea. And the administration stated they would respond to this buildup by sending 2 U.S. Navy destroyers to the Black Sea. But after Putin objected, we turned those ships around to appease the Russians. And, you know, this stand down signals a weakness and a lack of resolve, American resolve from my perspective on this. What do you believe that it signals to our adversaries?
Well, Congressman, I would tell you, I don't know, you know, there's a requirement when you enter the Bosphorus Straits to make notifications to the Turks that you're going there. There was open press reporting that talked about, you know, the Navy sending ships and Navy wasn't ships. I know our national security cutter Hamilton was in the Black Sea in the wake of that. So we did have a U.S. combatant there. It happened to have a Coast Guard racing stripe on board. They did some very important work as a counterclockwise navigated the Black Sea, partnering with many key ally partners. So I'm going to withhold any political judgment, sir, but I would tell you, I believe the Sixth Fleet commander, the Navier commander, put a U.S. surface capability there. Sir, I don't think there's an intimation, but I believe the work of this hearing that talks about, you know, an inclusive Coast Guard and my ability to action those combatant commander requirements and the homeland requirements are absolutely the same conversation. People are our business. I need to find the best and brightest of America from all walks of life and backgrounds that are able and want to serve, and I'm going to put them in the fight, sir. So these are mutually reinforcing conversations, and I'm committed to both.
Admiral, thanks for that. And let me just end by saying that the amount of drugs that are entering this country are just incredibly alarming. And I appreciate the work that you and the Coast Guard does and would urge you to continue to do that. It is affecting my district. The amount of fentanyl that has entered the state of Texas would, in the last 4 months, is enough to kill millions of people. And we have to continue to fight against that. And I appreciate what the Coast Guard does every single day in that fight as part of Homeland Security. And I appreciate you keeping your eye on the ball in the midst of a chaotic environment. With that, Mr. Chairman, I yield back.
Congressman, we pay great attention to numbers with the COVID deaths, and that's a tragic, terrible tragedy, and we're on a healthier course. 90,000, you know, overdoses and drug-related deaths last year. That's another number we need to pay attention to. The Coast Guard just one of many agencies. There's a prevention piece and there's an interdiction supply piece, and we're absolutely committed to that fight, sir.
Thank you, Admiral. With that, I yield
Time
back.
has expired. Chair recognizes the gentlelady from California for 5 minutes, Ms. Barragan.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, for holding this hearing. Thank you, Admiral Schultz, for joining us today. This year, I was appointed to the Coast Guard Board of Visitors. This board is tasked with making recommendations on the workings of the Coast Guard Academy regarding, among other things, recruitment and retention, including diversity, inclusion, and issues regarding women specifically. So today's discussion is of great interest to me, particularly after the committee's 2019 examination of serious cultural issues at the Academy and the clear indications that more work remains to be done there and across the entire service. Specific to the Academy, in a 2018 survey, almost half of the female cadets reported having been sexually harassed, and reports of sexual harassment and unwanted sexual contact have increased among male as well as female cadets at the Academy since 2016. Admiral Schultz, the Coast Guard's recently issued report, Sexual Assault in the U.S. Coast Guard for fiscal year 2020, shows us that the overwhelming majority of survivors of sexual assaults in FY20 were women. What percentage of these survivors are women of color?
Congresswoman, I would have to get back with that data. I do not have that specific data in front of me, but I will ensure that that we reach back to your staff, to the committee, with that as soon as possible, ma'am.
I appreciate that. Do you happen to know if you're seeing any trends in the data?
Congresswoman, I think when we look at the sexual assault data, and we respond through a lens called sexual assault prevention, response, and recovery, we updated our policy to focus on the recovery of victims as well. You know, any one sexual assault, sexual harassment case is too many. You know, the trend, there's an uptick this year from last year. If you go back 5-6 years, it's on a slow glide slope. You know, some would attribute, you know, more comfort in reporting. I think that's a tricky thing to do. You know, I believe we have created a more open environment to report. We have some ability now where you can, you know, confide in a friend as you try to navigate whether you report restricted, unrestricted reports. We are working hard to eradicate sexual assaults, sexual harassment from our ranks, as are the other services. We're working about, you know, the military justice, and anxiously waiting to see where Secretary Austin steers us. But it's ongoing work, ma'am. And, you know, with the 45% statistic at the Academy, I have met with the Academy faculty. And I said, if that is in fact a true statement reflective of the Cadet Corps, then I wouldn't be able to go home on a Friday afternoon unless I did something that day to drive that number from 45% to 44% to 0%. I have put my voice against that to say, is that is an inherent statistic. I hope that is not reflective. I would invite any member of the committee. I salute your willingness to be on the Board of Visitors and encourage. We reactivated that as an external body. It's not easy with our academy in New London to get that connection, man, but I'm committed to that. That's why we've reinstated it. I welcome the chairman or any of the members come up there and see the academy. It's an energizing place, but we have areas to improve, man, and we're working on that.
Thank you, Admiral. Would you agree that sexual harassment jeopardizes readiness and mission accomplishment?
1000%, yes.
And that it also weakens trust within the ranks and erodes unit cohesion?
Same answer, ma'am.
Well, thank you for acknowledging that, because one of my colleagues who earlier stated this hearing wasn't a priority. I think our national security is a priority, and this goes directly to the national security of this country. Admiral Schultz, we know that the women and women of color in particular are underrepresented in the Coast Guard ranks. How can they feel comfortable staying in or even joining the Coast Guard if they don't feel confident that their complaints will be taken seriously and that justice will be served?
Well, ma'am, what we need to do, Congresswoman, is we need to make sure, A, they're treated with respect and dignity, and when they have concerns or issues, that we're responsive to those. I am hoping that these 125 change agents, were about 85% to completion. As we start deploying them here in the coming weeks, and they're having the difficult conversations, they're raising the diversity inclusive acumen of our leaders, of our Coast Guardsmen. I think that's going to be a positive step on that. And then to the questions from Ms. Watson Coleman and others about accountability, we absolutely have to be an organization that's focused on accountability, and we will be that. And have we always got that right? We have not, but we are trying, and we will. You have my commitment. I know it is not my commitment, and it stops below me, man. This is the commitment of the Coast Guard senior leadership team, and we are working with our chief petty officers, who are critically enabling body. They're our senior enlisted recognized leaders. The chiefs mess are on board, the master chief petty officer on board, and we are trying to create that environment, ma'am, that allows us to be successful and allows us to attenuate the security needs of the nation, as you are eloquently articulated.
Well, thank you, Admiral. I think it's important that we focus on how leaders at the Academy are trained to handle reports of sexual assault and harassment, and certainly, you know, when a cadet reports harassment by a member of the faculty. So I look forward to working with you and improvements in this area that is so vital to national security and to our homeland. With that, Mr. Chairman, I yield back.
Thank you,
Young lady yields back. Chair recognizes gentleman from Michigan for 5 minutes, Mr. Maya.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and thank you, Admiral, for joining us here today. I represent West Michigan, and while I'm not fortunate enough to touch our wonderful Great Lakes, obviously we are proud of our Coast Guardsmen and women all of those who are helping to patrol our waters, not just internationally, but also along our Great Lakes and our northern border with our good ally, Canada. I wanted to both thank you for your earlier commitment to maintaining a strong and representative force and making sure that we're doing everything we can to stamp out anything within those ranks that may undermine the trust and faith that so many of the young men and women who join up in our uniformed forces have in their senior leadership, and their right to be treated with dignity and with respect in ways that build and maintain their cohesion so they can focus on the mission above all else. But I just wanted to drill down a little bit into Coast Guard priorities around our Great Lakes. As I mentioned, they play a vital operational role for both safety and security in our maritime environment. And I'm curious, just in your view, in your current role, what operational challenges is the Coast Guard currently facing within its Great Lakes region? Are there any persistent challenges to mission readiness that you're seeing?
Yeah, Congressman Meyer, thanks for the question. And I'm a guardian of the Great Lakes from 96 to 99, commanded a ship out of Western Michigan in Charlevoix. And the Great Lakes is a great place to be a Coast Guardsman. The nation, the world's largest supply of fresh water, critically and strategically important to the nation economically. So some of the challenges we have in the Great Lakes are challenges we have other parts of the nation. We have aging infrastructure, piers, boathouses. Not too long ago, when I visited St. Ignace in my 3-year tenures to date as a commandant, they were doing boat repair work in the salt facility that the highway used for salt repairs on the roads. And that's unacceptable. We need to do better by our folks. So we are getting after those infrastructure challenges across the Coast Guard. And again, it's up in the Great Lakes, they're the same things there. So in the Great Lakes, we have an air station in Detroit, an air station in Traverse City. We recently changed the aircraft in Traverse City from 65 Dolphin, smaller short-range helicopters to longer, medium-range, what we call Jayhawks, very capable. We stand a summer watch down in Chicago and over in Muskegon. So we're having a heck of a lot of challenges with our fleet of 98 MH-65 Dolphin helicopters, just in terms of their readiness, parts availability. We have flown them beyond any other organization in the world in those helicopters. I need to drive 98 down to a smaller number and drive up the fleet of Jayhawks to a bigger number. It's about 48 today, and I need to increase that. Standing those summer watches in those places is increasingly challenging. And with the 60 in Traverse City, that 60 really has the reach to ameliorate some of the concerns of why we had those airfacts in the first place. So I would welcome an opportunity with the members of the Michigan delegation about some things that have changed. Our increasingly more capable platforms on the surface, are increasingly better reach and on-time sustainment in the air with the Jayhawks. But Dolphin helicopters are really proving problematic for us in terms of parts, reliability, and we're committed to that for another decade or so. But where do I absolutely need to have them, and where could we take very minimal risk and still attenuate the concerns of your Great Lakes citizens? So I would welcome that conversation.
Well, thank you, Admiral. Well, obviously, many in Michigan are used to seeing the orange Dolphins, flying over our shores and our beaches. And as someone who served in the Army, I very much appreciate the Black Hawk platform and everything that can do in order to have an expanded range. And I'm a little dismayed to hear St. Ignace has some of the best smoked whitefish in the world, but it's frustrating that their boat repair capabilities are having to be outsourced to the road maintenance folks. I guess just real quick, and you touched upon this briefly, but just to put a finer point on it, please, what other areas besides that conversation and the rerouting of some of our aerial assets, what can Congress do to ensure the Coast Guard has the resources it needs to carry out this mission, not only on our northern border, but also to kind of patrol the inland seas?
Yeah, Congressman, I think I'll refer to an earlier answer. I think for us, it's an organization that lost 10% of our purchasing power on our operations support budget over the last year, sort of 8-9 years post sequestration, is getting healthy there. The Congress has invested in its Coast Guard in the last couple of budget cycles. It's maintaining that momentum so we can continue our recapitalization programs, and really that 3 to 5% annual growth that would allow me as a service chief and my successor to put forth the Coast Guard that can attenuate the needs of the nation, both at home and across the globe.
Thank you, Admiral. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I yield back.
Gentleman yields back. Chair recognizes gentlelady from Florida, Ms. Kamak, for 5 minutes.
Well, thank you, Mr. Chairman, and thank you, Admiral Schultz, for appearing before the committee today, and thank you for your service. I appreciate your commitment to inclusion and diversity as you have expressed in your opening statement and in your responses to my colleagues' questions today. And as someone who has personally worked military sexual trauma cases, I appreciate your comments today and look forward to seeing your continual engagement on this issue and how we can foster additional accountability and prevention in the Coast Guard ranks. Now, it's clear that you're committed to addressing these issues head on and resolving them in as a timely manner as possible. But I do want to shift over to another urgent issue regarding the U.S. Coast Guard's ability to counter Chinese aggression in the Pacific. So this is a two-part question, so bear with me. So with the recent agreement that the Coast Guard signed with Taiwan to improve communications, build cooperation, and share information on Coast Guard-related efforts, can you speak to that agreement and its importance, but also share if the Coast Guard has any plans to conduct any other phone ops, freedom of navigation operations in the Taiwan Strait in the near future?
So Congresswoman, thank you for the questions. Let me start with the second question first. So the
Sure.
Coast Guard has participated in some FONOPs in the region. One of our national security cutters back in 2019, two national security cutters, the Berthoff and Stratton, deployed back-to-back 5-month deployments each. So they covered about a 10-month period of the year. That was when the Arleigh Burke cruisers, McCain and Fitzgerald were undergoing repair work. So we brought some capacity to the conversation. It allowed the Fifth Fleet commander some flexibility where they assigned their most capable ballistic missile capable ships, and we could pick up some other duties. We did sanctions work. Any FONOPs in the region, it's when we send a ship to work with the Seventh Fleet in that part of the world. Those are decisions by the fleet commander, by the combatant commander. So if we put a ship in the fight, it's a trained ship. It's been used in the past, as I mentioned, for Taiwan Strait Transits type FONOPs. Could be in the future, but those are decisions that reside at the COCOM and the fleet level. But I will send capable assets upon request to them. To your first question, Congresswoman, here, just on the China threat, it is absolutely a Coast Guard piece to that. And I mentioned about being a recognized Coast Guard. I think that has the credibility that we operate in a rules-based modern maritime governance model. We can bring credibility through our voice. We can bring credibility through our forward deployed presence, which in a fairly small Coast Guard, we think about the Marines as the next smaller service north of 180,000 people. We're a 42,000 person Coast Guard, but I have demonstrated a willingness to take risks to put as much Coast Guard into that fight as we can. Those fast response cutters going to Guam, those national security cutters deploying to support the 7th Fleet Commander. We will continue to do that, working closely. I put a new Coast Guard captain on the Indo-Pacific staff in their J5 directorate there to work on how we optimally take finite Coast Guard capacity and put it against the top threats. I've been in discussions, former NSC staff, current NSC staff, about that part of the world. Everybody wants more Coast Guard. So how do we go to the right places with the right Coast Guard? It doesn't have to always be a ship. It could be an adaptive package. It could be training. We do a lot of mobile training. We're putting a new attaché in Singapore. I put an attaché in Australia this past summer that services New Zealand, Australia, and Papua New Guinea. I look at the Oceania region as a critically important part of the conversation about the Indo-Pacific, and that's work that's really righteous and right for the Coast Guard to step up to. But again, there's a capacity piece, so I have to be careful to not get too far ahead of my skis on how much I sign up to do, but I'm willing to put as much as I can into the fight, man.
Well, thank you, Admiral. I appreciate that. Now I'm going to bring it home a little bit. So I have a question regarding some concerns that I've heard from constituents in Florida. We are 3 years into the inspection of towing vessels and about to enter the final year of the new inspection regime's phase-in period. However, I'm hearing from several of my constituents that the Coast Guard is now rescinding certificates of inspection and issuing new requirements on things like certified lifeboatmen and changing policy on manning vessels with automated engine rooms. Can you provide more information as to why the Coast Guard is creating new hurdles several years into a phase-in process rather than focusing on proactive enforcement to get us to 100% inspection over the next few years?
Congresswoman, I need to take that back because I'm not familiar with those issues. We are working with, we brought in a large population north of 6,500 or so uninspected towing vessels. I think there's a tremendous uptick in terms of, or upside of that in terms of safety on the water, safety for our mariners that we have a responsibility to do. We're working with, third-party oversight and there's a split of some of that work remains Coast Guard work, organic Coast Guard work. Some of that goes to third party. We've really stepped up our game for third party oversight to make sure the enforcement scheme are compliant. They're standards based. The issues you talk about, I'm not sure. You know, my voice is always talking about the Coast Guard being a common sense regulator. If we're making changes mid-stride, let me understand what that is, ma'am. Let me make a commitment to you to research that. We'll work with your staff. We'll bring back answers to you if that's acceptable. I have not heard those issues. We heard some issues about, you know, vessels nosing out, and we worked to find a common sense with the AWO, which represents a large number of the unexpected towing vessels. I meet with them regularly. So I want to understand the issue, ma'am, and then I want to be able to speak to it from an informed fashion if that's acceptable to you.
That works great. Thank you so much, Admiral. Our teams will follow up. I appreciate your time. And again, thank you for your service. With that, I yield back, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you.
Young lady yields back. Chair recognizes gentleman from Georgia for 5 minutes, Mr. Clyde.
Admiral, thank you for being here and for your service to this nation. I hope the focus of the Coast Guard remains on equal opportunities and not equal outcomes. I believe it is up to individual members to determine their outcomes, and the Coast Guard should be all about merit-based evaluations with their personnel. I have complete confidence in the Coast Guard, and as a retired Navy commander who has spent many years haze gray and underway, I fully understand that the Coast Guard plays a very integral role in the defense of our nation. The strategic environment is rapidly evolving across the globe as our nation transitions our focus from threats of unequal warfare. I know that the Coast Guard's unique capabilities will serve as a critical component in countering both China and Russia. In addition, the Coast Guard's activities complement the efforts of Customs and Border Patrol in stopping the illicit flow of narcotics. So regarding China, Admiral, it's no secret that China is using their maritime industry, Coast Guard, and Navy to expand their influence in the Pacific. In addition to expanding this, they've used these entities to harass vessels that are engaged in oil exploration and other commercial activity. Can you briefly explain how the Coast Guard is working with our allies to help deter this harassment by China?
Yes, sir, Congressman. Thank you for the question. And just on the first point, to ensure those equal outcomes, I need to ensure the equal opportunities, and we need to address that. I think that is ongoing work, and I am committed to that. And we appreciate the Oversight Committee's focus and priority there. In terms of the China, what are we doing? What we bring to the region is we have transferred former Coast Guard cutters, what we call in the Excess Defense Program, a DoD-led program, to the Vietnamese. We've transferred them to the Sri Lankans. We've transferred them, other regional Indo-Pacific partner nations. The Philippines have 3 vessels. The Philippines are building a Coast Guard. Their Navy's less than 20,000. They're building a Coast Guard out of 35,000 strong. What the regional partners recognize is, the Coast Guard, a Coast Guard, is an organization that allows you to force, domestic laws, and it also allows you to bring some national security into the conversation. They see the agility of our U.S. Coast Guard as really a useful sentinel for them in their region of the world. So what we're doing is we're helping them build out their Coast Guards. We have an advisor in the Philippines, have an O4 advisor with the Vietnamese. We do mobile training teams. We bring many of those regional partners here to our resident courses, and we do exchanges at sea. When those national security cutters were over there in 2019, I visited the National Security Cutter Stratton Import in the Philippines to show the Commandant's commitment to that. I met with the Philippine leaders, my Pacific Area Commander, now Vice Commandant. She traveled through the region. Some restrictions, obviously, in the recent 15, 16 months, but we will do subject matter engagements. We will do senior leader engagements. We will do all that partnered with the Indo-Pacific team because the combatant commander owns the regional responsibility, sir. But we are absolutely about putting as much Coast Guard across subject matter experts, key leader engagements, mobile training, forward deployed platforms, at sea exchanges. I think all those things, sir, really bring the Coast Guard goodness to that conversation.
All right. Is there anything that we in Congress can do to help you with that mission that we haven't done already?
No, Congressman, I talked about the budget, so I, at the risk of kicking that can another time, I would just say, recognizing, that the Coast Guard, which is small, which is outside of the Department of Defense, is an armed force. We had some challenges back in late 18, 19, where where Coast Guard men and women went unpaid for 35 days. That was tough. I didn't think as a service chief I would be explaining to folks why they didn't earn a paycheck. We have not quite fixed that. We fixed, with the support of the Congress, a parity for our retirees that'll go effect in the coming years, and I'm excited about that. Some retirees live paycheck to paycheck, and the fear of not getting a check is pretty palpable. Just a continued recognition, Lord willing, it doesn't happen again. We ever have a shutdown, that the armed force men and women of the Coast Guard don't, somehow end up unpaid again. I'd like to make sure there's a parallel consideration with our DoD brethren and sisters in the armed forces that reside in the Department of Defense.
Oh, absolutely. I concur with you 100% on that. And you'll have my full support to make sure that the Coast Guard is on parity with the Department of Defense when it comes to that there should be no reason that the Coast Guard should suffer in any way like that. So thank you for bringing that important subject up.
Thank you, Congressman.
I got another question for you regarding transnational crime. Since this administration has taken office, has the Coast Guard seen an increase in human and narcotics trafficking?
Congressman, I think the narcotics smuggling is persistent. And have we seen an uptick or not? That's tough to say. We stop somewhere in the 10 to 20% of those illicit narcotics smuggled by sea. It's a vast ocean with a finite of Coast Guard cutters involved, Coast Guard law enforcement teams on a finite number of Navy ships as your Navy is increasingly globally deployed, and they have to make tough choices about the pacing China threat, the difficult Russian problem set, activities on the Arabian Gulf and the Middle East. I think that's a persistent threat there. I alluded to the increasing loss of life here domestically from the opioids and fentanyls, and really cocaine use is up, cocaine related deaths are up. So that's important work. So to say, is it up, is it down? I don't know. I think what we have seen a little bit at the border, and this is an apolitical statement, is, years back when the cartels, they sort of steered away from being involved in the human trafficking at the border because it threatened their narcotics business. It seems to be that cartels are back. Are they the exact same cartels? I don't know. But I think transnational criminal activity is alive and well. A well-funded Coast Guard gets after a large portion of that, and that will remain a priority for us, sir.
Well, thank you. I think you do a great job in interdiction too. So, but
Gentleman's time has expired.
All right, I yield back. Thank you, Admiral.
Thank you. I thank the witness for his testimony and the members for their questions. Some members have indicated that they will have additional questions for you, Admiral Schultz, and we ask that you respond expeditiously in writing to those questions. The chair reminds members that the committee record will remain open for 10 business days. Without objection, the committee stands adjourned.